Good morning, Ryder.
Hi, Reed.
Oh, it's Silly Ryder. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, guys. How's it going?
Well, I think we should start off our children's program. What do you think?
Yeah.
Oh, we talk about all good things, only the things that kids should hear about, nothing else. I totally trust myself to do that.
What should kids hear about, Reed? The
Well,
alphabet?
the alphabet is a very important thing.
What word starts for you? What if you had a word for you? What would it be, Reed?
Ukulele, because my wife plays ukulele naked. Wait, oh no, this is a kid's show. Oh no, oh we ruined it already. We're so good.
Oh, thank God we did ruin it.
I don't know if my vocal cords could do
childhoods.
that for a full, hour. That would be tiresome.
You can work up to it.
Hey, yeah,
It'd be like a fitness contest for your vocal cords.
Yeah, there you go. So, how you doing there, Ryder? Happy Thursday.
Thanks, man. All good here. Been doing manual labor the last few days, and I actually really enjoy manual labor, but my body doesn't enjoy it as much as it used to. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Back
a
in the
little
day
tight.
where you were like, I've been outside for a little bit. Ooh, let me rip off the shirt and let these glistening muscles just show off in my manliness.
Quick! Somebody spray me down so I'm glistening.
Yes. Sometimes the body, does that. That's part of being 85,
Yeah, it's so strange. Of course, I'm still stronger and faster than those young whippersnappers. They just don't know what it means to really work.
You're right, because back in your day when you walked uphill in the snow both days to the farm, you didn't have even telephones or radios. So all you could do was manual labor.
I don't even have one now. Just out of spite, I accept no new technology. Just carry around a stick and I just hit things with it.
Well, a wise man once said, "Speak softly, but carry a big stick."
Was it a wise man? I don't know.
Trivia question for you. Who said that quote?
It sounds like Winston Churchill or something.
I think it might have been Roosevelt.
Okay. Well, yeah.
The trick is that this is my favorite way to play trivia is I'll ask people like, "Oh yeah, trivia question. What is this?" And then they guess and they guess, okay, yeah. And what about you? And what about you? Oh, don't answer the same thing. Are you sure?" And then after all that, I'm like, I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I know. President Garfield. I remember playing some trivia one time, and Garfield was the answer to like 4 questions out of 10.
Really?
Was
He's like one of the more obscure presidents. Let's be real.
That's why. So he's like a good trivia president. I don't think he's a great president for a whole lot else because he didn't go down very well in history. But for trivia, he was fantastic.
So let's talk about your accomplishments in office. Well, I'm top trivia president.
I know.
And there's been 46 now, so I'm pretty happy about that.
I know. When you need an obscure president, but not too obscure. Yeah, I'm your guy.
Well, yesterday we talked all about being sorry. Sometimes you're sorry that you were president, sometimes not. And honestly, I would be curious to know an honest exit interview from each president. Like, hey, if you could go back and do this again, would you still do it? And I would be curious to know the percentages on that one because, those presidents come out looking pretty rough,
Oh man, yeah. It's sort of the classic thing. I actually don't think Trump looked like he aged at all any differently. Maybe he did. Like you didn't see the before and afters of him. You saw a lot of before and afters of like Obama though and George W. Like those dudes, like they aged hard while they were in office.
Yeah, I'm gonna dodge that bullet and not give reasons why that might be.
Yeah,
But
I'm just throwing it out there. It's like the meme, but yeah, I just didn't see any for the Trump side. But yeah, there is something about those guys come out like I think Obama came out like full gray.
Yeah,
Like afterwards, and it was like, whoa, that was a rough time period. Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough job, man. I think you might want it, and then you get it, and you're just like, uh-oh, approaching burnout in the first week.
oh yeah. No, I I don't envy that job at all. I respect it, but that's got to be one of, if not the, no, I don't know. These are superlatives, right? But it's got to be an extremely hard and taxing job. And I've heard someone say it may have been a wise man, may have been a dumb child. I don't know. But somebody said one time that by the time something gets to the president's desk, there are no good decisions to be made, and they just have to pick one. And so that's a tough
Yeah.
position to be in.
Yeah, yeah. I think I've heard something similar. So, yeah, because you've always got smart people around you who have thought about a lot of things,
Yeah,
and
it's
it's
kind of like when a case goes to trial. Like cases only go to trial if there's not like an obvious answer, right? That's why they go to trial. So same kind of thing, except by the time it gets to the president, how many desks has it sat on? How many smart people have looked at it, right?
yeah, two
Two.
two smart people.
Two. Yes, I like that. Well, yesterday, to get back from my side tangent, we talked about being sorry, and we talked about how, you know, maybe some people say it a little bit too much, and we talked about how that may have some effect on the subconscious, on identity, on confidence, all of these types of things where you may not realize it, but we've talked about on the show many times about how our bodies, our heads, we're kind of like computers, and those computers are being programmed all the time. And believe it or not, you're programming yourself by the things you do, by the things you think, by the things you read, by the things you say. And when you're apologizing, when you're saying sorry, you are admitting that you did something wrong. You're admitting fault. And so if you're doing that all the time, that means you're wrong all the time. And if you're wrong all the time, surely that has some sort of effect on you.
Yeah, and I think, in our episode we did discuss like what if you are wrong all the time, or if you're just saying these things by default, but you position yourself. I was thinking about that more yesterday, is that by apologizing you position yourself into sort of a state of deferral, as if you're deferring to the other person. And we talked about politeness and manners and stuff like that, but I also at the end sort of brought up the idea of hierarchy, and that there becomes kind of a hierarchy, and it's often easier to submit, to just move through and be polite, which, okay, sure, that's one way of getting through the world, but the other is to not submit and to take on the additional burden or responsibility, which is interesting. To You don't want to be a jerk about it, but maybe you don't need to apologize. I found myself twice yesterday apologizing. I couldn't make it through the challenge,
Oh,
and
so close.
I know, and they were both frivolous. Like, they just,
Were we in your head whenever you were doing
yeah,
it?
yeah. I
Okay.
was just like, what? Oh, like, I have thoughts about this, but I can't enact them, right? Or I didn't enact them the way, because it's a reflex. Saying sorry is a reflex. It's not something that's, or at least for me, it is. So yeah, the first one was, I was walking out of a door and I tried the wrong door, and then this person goes, "That door doesn't work," and I was like, "Oh, sorry." I I don't know why. I'm not sorry for that.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I don't, yeah, I should have said thanks, and instead I said sorry, and I was like, "Okay, well, that was reflex number 1." And then later we were pulling, these 2 by 4s out of the bed of my truck, and I nearly hit a
Hold
guy
on. Can
with
you say
one.
that one more time, but with the country accent a little slower?
Born No, I can't. I was about to, "We're the bro." Yeah. 2 by 4. Yeah, I don't know. It was just, so we were pulling these 2 by 4s out, and I nearly hit my buddy, and I was like, "Oh, sorry." And I actually was sorry for that one. Sorry for nearly whacking you in the head with a 2 by 4. So, yeah, but that was also sort of a reflex. So,
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things we talked about yesterday, which was it's okay to say sorry, right? And there's definitely times where it makes sense. But the things that we're trying to help people control is, hey, maybe not all the time, and maybe try and work on those reflexes ones that you got a little bit, and try and pull that back in. So one thing that Danielle and I talked about after the episode was we talked a little bit about childhood. Oh, well, real quick before I say that, I didn't want to mention that I it don't underestimate how much this little thing can stick in your head, right? Because now I've had some people who I've kind of been pushing to do this for a couple months, and I still get things from them where like, it's be a text message or an email, and it's like, I know I'm not supposed to say sorry, and I say sorry too much, and I'm like, but they're like, hey, you're thinking about it at least. So that's the main thing. The first step, any
Yeah.
time of changing any type of habit, is recognizing that you're doing it. You have that trigger, and then you have the action that you normally do, which is saying sorry. And so now, instead of saying sorry, you're going to think, hey, Reed and Ryder said maybe say sorry a little bit less. And then what's another word choice I can make? And that change is going to be a little bit hairy. But yeah, there's ways to talk around it. It just may take a little bit of extra wording. But I think it's worth it. So yesterday after the show, Danielle and I were debriefing a little bit, and we were talking about childhood, and we're like, okay, well, what kind of input does that have in how much we say sorry? And so she was talking about how, hey, so when it comes to punishment, that's one of the things that people or parents teach their kids, right? Is, hey, you need to say sorry, or you need to go into the corner and you need to go think about this type of thing. And so, like, say she acted out, and she maybe it was something she wasn't sorry about, but then she got punished, and then she realized that she should be sorry. And so, in some ways, that's about the training process of punishment and saying sorry. And I don't know, does that make you think of anything?
Oh, child development in general, socialization, norms, traditions, right? Like all these kind of things that it is interesting when your parents want you to know when you've messed up. And I'm always curious about why they want you to know that. Is it for themselves or is it for your movement through society? So I'm a little bit curious about those things. It, it is kind of interesting as well because, of course, it's a means to control somebody, right? Bad, 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 shame, shame, shame. Now correct your
Shame,
behavior. Yeah.
shame, shame. I'll just be here the rest of the episode. You just keep going.
Just like hitting your bell.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely there you go. The shame bell.
I think we should have more of like a shame clown.
I know. Sorry,
Yeah.
fellas.
So yeah, talking about shame and cultural
Yeah,
norms.
I just think it's understandable because, of course, we socialize people to also help them in the future, right? You don't want people to be selfish. So when your kid takes a toy from another kid, there ends up typically being kind of a punishment cycle that happens. No, that's not right. Quit thinking about yourself. Think about somebody else. Because we might all be like naturally, selfish, greedy creatures, even though maybe that's not true. It's always kind of fascinating to see where that stuff comes from, and then how you try to shape somebody to not have those beliefs. And I wonder if punishment actually works. Like, from I think some of the things we've talked about in the past, it doesn't work. It just creates different kinds of traumas later that then you have to work through.
Yeah, I think there might be a little bit of the truth in there for sure. One other example that she brought up that I wanted to make sure to mention was there was a time where she did something and she immediately knew it was something bad. She was playing with her toys and her Grammy wasn't paying attention to her. Like, Grammy, play with me. And so she threw like a matchbook or matchstick car or whatever those things are called, a Hot Wheels car. And she hit her grandmother in the lip with the car. So she
Nice
assaulted her
shot.
grandmother. And so then she spent some time in juvie, and then she learned her lesson.
I know. She came out hardened.
She
She
came
like
out
could
so
make
hard.
shivs out of toothbrushes
She
and
went in Danielle. She came out Dan. She had gold teeth. She started a gang.
just
It was great. No, but she immediately like ran in the other room, started crying, and basically she knew, kind of like when you hit your friend with the 2x4 yesterday, like, oh, whoops, I messed up here. Especially when it comes to physically harming someone, that's probably one of the more obvious times where you should be apologetic and sorry. But yeah, so I thought that was interesting to think about. Is like, hey, punishment is our way of training our little humans and people as a whole, to conform to the norms that we think are important within our culture. And oh, by the way, those can vary a lot based on where you live, who you are, what your background is, what country you're in, what state you're in, what city you're in, political, leanings, all those types of things. So that kind of shifts what's right and wrong. And that's one of the jobs of a parent, is to help impose some of those things. And then your job as an adult is to help unlearn some of the things that your parent taught you that maybe you're just wrong or they
Yeah.
don't vibe anymore.
Yeah, and, we did talk a little yesterday about being people pleasers or middle children or something like this, and there's also these interesting ideas of sort of like where we fit in, and sort of uh, the thing about knowing. Well, I'm kind of losing the thread here. There was another point I was going to make about that, and
Ah,
it's
no
gone.
worries. If it comes back later, you can just bring it right back up. One other thing that it made me think of, though, was an article my dad sent me yesterday, which I haven't finished reading yet, but it was in the magazine Esquire, and it is about. It's called "How to Love Your Parents Even If You Hate Their Politics," and I'm only part of the way through it, so I don't know what it's all about. But basically,
Oh,
from what I've
okay.
heard,
This is the point you. I was going to bring up. I was going to bring up how cancel culture also shapes people, which
oh
is
right,
politics. And
yeah,
so, yeah. Okay, keep
no, oh,
rocking.
perfect. No, good. Right on the same page. And in this case, the author was an immigrant. His parents were Russian immigrants, and one of the points he was making in the article is like, my parents, like, they can have the best intentions, but they're teaching what they know, and they're teaching what happened to them and what worked for them. And like, I don't remember exactly the example he gave, but I'll jump to another example I've heard of someone who came from Vietnam. It's like, my parents came over on a boat. They were avoiding missiles and not missiles, but gunfire and stuff like that. That's a little bit different than me growing up in the suburbs in America, right? And so there's a little bit of different things. One of the examples you said was when he had asthma, they took him to somebody and someone put their hands in ice water and then rubbed it on his chest. And like, all right, that's going to make that better. And it's like, okay, maybe that worked for you guys, but not the approach I want to take. And so he was saying how that's a struggle with immigrant parents, especially, is that it's just such a different setting that some of the things just don't hold true anymore. And so I'm going to be checking that out a little bit more, and I'll share that in the chat in case anyone else is interested. It's an Apple News link, but you might be able to find it elsewhere. It's an Esquire article, and the title is "How to Love Your Parents Even If You Hate Their Politics." Well, anything else on being sorry, writer, before we move on?
No, no. I think we covered quite a bit of it. I am interested in eventually maybe moving into this other topic. How that plays out sort of societally, and how parents, doing their best actually end up doing things that later we get to complain about. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm we need to get a psychologist or child development psychologist or something like that in here, because that would be really good, and also ties in wonderfully to some fun news for me. Actually, yesterday I became an uncle for the first time. Yeah.
Nice. Whoa. Well, what are you
Yes.
gonna do now with your new
Uh,
status, your new
well,
title?
I've
You
got
gonna
to
put it on your
decide.
business cards?
I got to decide if I want to be a gunkle, because those are in style. I got to decide how much I want to spoil them, how much I want to tell them all the bad things to do. There's a lot of different roles I could fill here.
Yeah, it's a big decision, man. I'm glad somebody else made it for you.
That's the best thing about being an uncle, right? Is that it's like
Yeah, you have no
before
say in it.
yeah, before I have kids, it's like I just get to go in and have a little taste and see, like, okay, here's what it's like. Okay, see you later. Bye.
Bye. Yeah,
The
yeah,
best part
yeah.
about
It's
visiting
also,
kids.
I would love it if you like got to talk to your, sister or brother, whomever, and just sort of say, "No, I don't want to be an uncle, so you don't get to have kids."
Right? Yeah, that's funny. Well, hey, anything else on the sorry before we move over to our intro?
No, no. Let's move it.
All right. Helpful for life. And welcome to What the Hell is Water. Today is January 13th, which is a Thursday in the year of 22 years past 2000. And it is episode 71 on What the Hell is Water. I'm Reed Garcia, the founder of Helpful for Life.
This is Ryder Richards, co-host.
Man who does manual things.
I am manual, and the problem is the hands are getting all cut up.
Oh
So
yeah.
I've been doing the thing where I'm putting blue tape and paper towels around my hands because they just keep bleeding on the sheetrock,
Oh,
and I'm just like,
if there's one thing that I enjoy about blue collar workers is finding out all of the random crap that they do to their hands. It's like, oh,
I
got a little grease on my hands, just dip it in some brake cleaner.
I know.
It comes
Oh,
right
look, it
off.
came right off. Ooh, why do I feel woozy?
Hey, look, I can light it on fire afterwards. And it doesn't even burn. Oh, got a cut? Let me just put some duct tape on it. Just as good as stitches.
Yeah, it's actually, yeah, it's pretty good. Like the super glue actually works pretty well first, and then you duct tape it so that you don't get, keep bleeding. But yeah, it's
Oh.
pretty good. And then the funny thing about it is like no matter what now, I feel like I'm bleeding from some part of my hands every day. And then I
Well, I'm
look
sure the
down today
cold
and
and
I'm like,
dry doesn't help either, right?
yeah, yeah, maybe that's it. It's probably the dryness. I'm trying to get better about hydrating. The first 2 days I wasn't so good at hydrating, but yesterday I got a whole case of water and I'm just down in it as I work.
Nice. I like to hear that. Maybe you need one of those helmets, like a beer helmet.
Yeah,
And if you
yeah,
use
just
beer,
with
it's 95% water, so that's basically the same thing.
oh, that's yeah, and it tastes better. So
Exactly.
yeah.
I mean, they used to do it all the time in the olden ages. I don't know why they stopped, to be honest.
Eh, all those people getting run over by carts. Like I always thought that was kind of interesting. You'd hear about somebody like getting their leg run over by a cart, and I was like, but carts move really slow. Like, how did you not have time to get out of the way?
Oh, I'm trying to remember what show it is, but there's some show where they did, I think it was a cartoon show, maybe Family Guy, I don't know, where there's like, he's in the middle of the street and then there's like a car like moving towards him and he's like, no! And it might be Spaceballs or something like that too.
There's like Mike Myers has yeah the scenes in
Oh,
the
that's what it
Spy.
is. Yeah,
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 yeah. It's is the Spy Who Shagged Me.
yeah,
Austin
yeah.
Powers, yeah, and it's like no, and it's like a 30-second scene, and it's like a golf cart or whatever going like 2 miles an hour. And it's like, what are you doing?
Oh, yeah, that's kind of how I always feel like I just remember reading these stories or whatever and you hear about, somebody who's got a bad leg because it's run over by a cart and I'm just like eh, now we have cars and it's more understandable that our reaction times aren't up to par, but carts move at most 10 miles an hour really. So,
Well, I've said it before on the show, but I'll say it again because it's a public service announcement. As we move forward into the future, more and more electric cars come around, and electric cars are very quiet. That was something I realized when I went
mm,
to go cross the street a couple times in California. In Texas, you don't have to worry about it because you're and occasionally you get a you get all kinds of stuff around here. But then in California, all you get is a and so if you don't look both
yeah.
ways, you're gonna get hit.
Yeah, yeah, the road noise from those cars is just nothing. And yeah, yeah, so it's going to be start being dangerous. Once we have all these electric cars, it'll I don't know. They're also supposed to be smarter, so they're supposed to like sense humans and stop. And I'm like, you could just put, pipes on that sucker. Just
Yeah.
better exhaust system.
Well, today, Ryder, one of the beauties of you being remote is you have no idea what we're going to talk about until you sit in that chair. And today, I
Mm.
actually went with the lovely, amazing topic of whatever the heck we come up with. So I thought it might be fun for us to just come in with no agenda and see where life takes us. So that being said, what's been on your
Oh.
mind lately?
Oh, what has been on my mind? Lots of various things. I've been trying to Zettlecast this book lately. Let me
The
get the
World
camera.
Beyond Your Head by Matthew
Yes.
B. Crawford. Cool. We'll put a link in the chat to
Eh,
that.
Yeah, and I've basically been reading this book for 4 months. Like I read it and now I'm Zettelcasting it, which I'm just going back through to reread it and try to take better notes. And I'm probably going to end up podcasting about it. But the problem is, I like. every paragraph there's something in there that I want to write down, and I take notes on, and then my notes start extrapolating, and it's like I'm doing the opposite of Zettlecasting. And if y'all don't know, Zettlecasting is a method of note taking where you kind of, yeah, there you go, where you kind of condense down what the book is saying into sort of primary points or topics. You do kind of a really nice one sentence summary of, or two, you maybe do two of these per day when you read a book. And yet I'm taking copious notes. And the problem with taking copious notes is you're not going to probably read through all of them again, because you might as well just read through the whole darn book again. So you need to be able to condense it. And so it's one of the things that I'm trying to work through right now, is trying to practice this technique. And of course, the more I dig into the book, the more I want to extrapolate. And it's making it sort of worse. But I hopefully in the future I can summarize it, turn it back into nice little chunks of information.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that that would make for a great album. You know, whenever you become a musician, is like trying to Zettelcast this book right now. I think that would get a lot of viewers and a lot of
Yeah.
listeners. So I just wanted to clarify the full word is Zettelkasten. So it's called the Zettelkasten Method. And let's see if I can do this here. Um, so Zettelkasten, I'm going to take that off. It's a method, and here's a picture for those who are at home. The word is Zettelkasten. It's spelled Zettelkasten. Zettelkasten. It's German, I believe. And what it is it's a method of tying information together, and it started off a long time ago. I think in the 1800s, sometime.
Nicholas Luhmann
Thank you.
was the main guy. Yeah.
And he basically had this system of he had basically a bunch of what are they called, file cabinet type of things, and he just basically took all of his information and he put them onto note cards. And for every note card, he assigned them an ID number. He said, "Oh, this is number 1, this is number 2," and then you would write the first idea or whatever on number 1, and then later on he would say, "Oh, well, that links to this other idea, which is number 3." And so then maybe 3 links to some other ideas, and then maybe you even have an index somewhere where you say, "Hey, here's all of the times where I talked about zoology," and that's going to be number 1, number 5, number 72, and 34. And so basically what it is a way of interconnecting these ideas. And using this method, he became a very prolific writer. I don't remember any of his like superlatives, but he wrote like a crazy amount of things. And
Yeah.
we learned a little bit about this, and at least for me, writer, my exposure to this was through Rome Book Club, which we've mentioned a handful of times. And the nice thing about Rome Research, which is a digital note taking software that we've talked about a handful of times that Ryder and I use, is it does this type of connections for you in software. So you don't have to have a filing cabinet full of pieces of paper. You just type things in a certain way and it links them together. And if you're a programmer, another thing that might help you think about this is a linked list or a doubly linked list. And if you don't know what that means, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's a pretty, I think it was one of the best sort of practical books that I read last year. I read quite a few books last year, and How to Take Smart Notes was the book we read in Rome Research, and it's by Sonka Ahrens, and he talks through how Zettelkasten works. So you don't have to just do Wikipedia knowledge or YouTube. If you don't want to, you can actually pick up a book and go through it. And of course, it's fun to try to Zettelcast a book about Zettelkasten. So, but yeah, it's a note taking method, and the way that the notes link together should make your process have discovery as part of it. So in the future, when he would sort of open his card files, he could pull out something, find the tag, go find something else. So it makes your writing process more a process of discovery rather than a process of you having to hold all of the information in your head and then just lay it out in a structured order from your head. And this way you can kind of, as you go through, you can find tags. And his idea was that your articles and your books start to write themselves through the research that you've done. So if you have a good enough note-taking method, then it can actually just become your papers. Your outlines happen automatically nearly. And then all you have to do is put in a little bit of context. So I really like the method, and I'm trying to practice it. And it is interesting because I am one of those people that will underline in my book and I take short notes, but there's also this tendency to almost start journaling about the notes. So I might read, 5 pages and then journal for 10 pages about what I think about it. And
Yeah, well,
so
I think it's a
it's a
good
great
practice.
processing
Yeah.
method, but at the same time, if I'm going to use these articles in the future, then I'm not going to need to read 10 more pages. If
Sure.
you keep on going that direction, you end up with a ton of text and then you'll never process it. So the idea of Zettlecaston is, of course, to crunch that down. So it's been kind of fun, but this book is a lot about the world beyond your head, is a lot about individuality and how it plays out today. Um, One of the topics I was just reading about is how it's one of the things that we never really critique. It's almost a taboo topic to say that individualism is bad. So almost everyone agrees that it's great, and yet he brings up these sort of instances where it's not: depression, chemical dependence, um, the idea that we've gotten away from a lot of sort of classical structures and traditions that actually helped people survive, and these other kinds of things. I mean, there is this notion out there that therapy is a replacement for community because we've become so individualistic. We have gotten away from community structures where we used to get therapy through big groups of people. And so now we have to turn to private sources to get it. So there's these kind of notions that play out through the book that are pretty interesting when you start kind of going like, oh, you sort of add in some sort of biochemical determinism or something like that with the human is a machine, and we can fix the human with machine inputs and outputs, and we can also make the human, better, stronger, faster. But at the same point, there's been this abstraction in the workplace where increasingly it's very difficult for you to build skills that will last you your whole life. You're always going to have to be learning. And one of the topics I was reading about this morning was that there is this book by a guy named Ehrenberg, and he talks about how depression is a reaction to that. It's basically a fear of having to look at your life and go, I'm going to have to strive forever to reach this high mark. And the mark is always going to be changing because we've increasingly gotten away from being able to develop a set of skills that will last you your whole life. It's always new potential, and you have to be flexible, and there's all this kind of stuff. And when you kind of look at that really hard, you just go, oh, this is horrible. And a lot of people fall in despair from it. You sort of pair that up with a lack of community because we're all individuals, and we're sort of cutting ourselves off at our own knees to try to move forward in the world. So the book is kind of talking about some of those topics. That's just a snippet. That's like 2 paragraphs out of chapter 9 that I just talked about. So that's why the book is so hard to Zettlecast, because it's just really dense.
Yeah, well, one of the things about a good book is that they've taken out all the crap, right? And so it is very dense, and that's something that we. What's that book about reading books?
How to take smart notes, or
No, the other one.
the other, oh gosh,
How to read.
the one we read. It is something like how to read a book.
I think that might even be the title. How to read a book. Uh,
Yeah, that's
by
it. That's the
Yeah, How
title.
to Read a Book by Adler, Mortimer
Yes,
J. Adler.
Adler and Van Doren.
Adler and Van Doren. Yeah, that was the one where that's one of the things they mentioned is like, hey, not all books are good. Not all books, a lot of books have 90% crap in them. Basically, I'm paraphrasing
Hmm.
clearly, but yeah. So it sounds like this might be a good book, or at least a dense book at that. So that's interesting. One thing I want to make sure to point out is, a lot of the things that Ryder was mentioning was, hey, this use Zettlecast in order to maybe potentially write something, and that's where the guy who initially created that method. But I want to encourage people at home that you do not need to be creating something for this to be valuable. Part of it is about you learning and developing your thoughts on something. And another topic that I wanted to make sure to bring up that's also related to this is something called an Evergreen Note. And that's another thing that's talked about a lot in the note-taking space. The note-taking space sounds so fancy. But I also learned about, as in my Rome research journey, And before I forget, I'm going to go ahead and plug next Thursday, we're going to have a guest on where we're going to talk more about this stuff. And we're also going to talk about something called building a second brain, which is a method that a guy named Tiago Forte has created. And we're going to talk about with somebody next week more about that. So if that interests you, check out next Thursday, January 20th. But back to my point about the thing that I've now distracted myself with, my plug.
The second brain, the note taking.
Oh, Evergreen Notes. Thanks, writer.
Yes.
The Evergreen Notes is a concept of you create a note that is evergreen. It's going to last forever. It's always going to be, in season or whatnot. And the idea is you have a topic that you want to learn more about, and maybe you want to write something about it or create something from it, but you don't need to. You have a topic you want to learn more about. Say it's parenting, right? And then you create a page for all of your notes on parenting, and you do some initial research, you add to that page. Then maybe you just leave it and you come back like weeks, days, months, years later, and you add some more things. Every time you learn something new, you basically put it into this spot. And that's one of the things that for me has been, kind of life changing, honestly, with Rome Research is it's now given me a place where I can put all of my thoughts and I can develop them over time. And oh, by the way, I can see how they change over time and what was going on in my life when those things were changing. And maybe there was a book I read, maybe there's a person I talked to, maybe there was some food I ate, maybe, there's something I did. And I really look forward to, I don't know, 5 years from now, seeing just how much all this stuff changed, but not only how much it changed, but being able to see the change happening. And I think that's so
Mm.
cool. And then also you can then trace back all of your sources and things like that. So I'm not overestimating, and I don't get paid by Rome or anything, but it literally has changed the way I think, and it's been a very good way for me to learn and develop a lot. So we're going to talk more about it for sure on this show, and maybe some off the show. But in case you guys haven't heard of it before, Rome Research, RomeResearch.com, I believe you can Google it, but that's that. Well, writer. So that's one of the books that you're reading. I know you're an avid. Oh, real quick, Danielle hopped in the chat and she said, she's late to the party today, but it wasn't it wasn't a car. It was a plastic horse, which makes sense because she's a huge horse person, and so yeah, it's good to know that it was not not a matchstick car. So. um,
Girls and horses.
yeah.
I mean, it's not the boys don't have it too, but it is
My Little
interesting.
Pony, My Little Pony. Yeah.
Well,
Oh boy.
well,
So yeah.
then there's cowboys, right? Which is like I'm gonna spend my whole life with horses. You
Nice.
know?
You know what else is nice? Spilling tea all over yourself. That's lovely.
There, show us those abs.
Mm.
Pull that. Oh yeah,
Mm.
woo! The
So
show
we know
just got more interesting.
we we know that you read books, but I also know that you
Yeah.
listen to a lot of podcasts. Have there been any
Mm.
podcasts that you've been listening to that have really piqued your interest?
I listened to one yesterday while I was working, which is at some point my buddy ran off to Lowe's to run some errands because that's what happens. You never have all the right stuff or the enough of it. So while he was gone, I listened to a podcast called Acid Horizon, and it was they were talking to a therapist who is also sort of reads a lot of philosophy and he's a psychologist that his name is Carl Rogers. And so I listened to this podcast and then I started listening to one of their other ones. But Acid Horizon is a critical theory philosophy podcast, and it might be a little bit. It's just novel to me because some of the philosophy that I've read is old school, and these guys are reading more contemporary and current stuff. They're a lot of Deleuze and Guattari kind of references. Mark Fisher, who I think is really great, a guy who passed away, I think, in the early aughts, but really good kind of critic of capitalism, and not in the ways you would traditionally think of capitalism, but in ways of like he brought up some original arguments about what it is doing to us as far as health and the way like depression is showing up and things like that, which are not often critiqued when we talk about capitalism. He brings up some points about how the cure for most capitalism is just more capitalism. And so Mark Fisher is kind of an interesting guy if you're interested in that. It's Capitalist Realism is the name of that book. But yeah, the podcasts I listened to recently seem to be heading more and more into this sort of philosophy space. Occasionally I'll listen to like a Tim Ferriss, but I also really like the Knowledge Project, and that's Farnham Street. And a guy named Shane Parrish hosts a lot of those interviews, and the interviews are with people who are doing something excellent in some sort of space, business world or whatever. And so the interviews he does are pretty nice as well. So those are a couple of them. I've got more, but let's stop with that.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess the first thing I think is, okay, hey, that's a lot of forgive me, dense philosophy talk. So if you were to kind of boil that down, I'll challenge you on this one a little bit. To someone who's not familiar with philosophy, like what would you kind of give like a couple sentences on that?
Yeah, if one of the things about philosophy that I think can be they talked about in this podcast is that there tends to be kind of two directions it goes. One of them is you want to beat other people up in arguments,
Okay.
and so you learn philosophy so you can be, kind of a tyrant. And this other one is that, you're the kind of person who is like, you're not really sitting on a chair, you're sitting on a whole bunch of atoms or something, right? And you can just, be pedantic. And so there's these kind of two things that oftentimes people go with when they think about philosophy is you want to be good at arguing, or you want to deconstruct everything I say and take it into a la la land that it has no impact on the real world. But there's also this other kind of idea that maybe for philosophy itself is like, what is a good life? Like, what do you care about? And why do you care about it? And being able to sort of have some roots or some ways to think about it and ways to talk about it can be interesting, because it can help you get deeper and deeper insight. So that's kind of the model that I go for. And what I like about the Acid Horizon podcast is that they will talk about things that I am not familiar with at all, and they talk about them in very deep, dense language, which introduces me to new language and new ideas. And it's like a workout, and oftentimes I'll have to listen to it two or three times in a row to pick up what's going on. But I'm kind of also thinking that this might be part of becoming a better person, a richer person, mentally and conceptually, and how I engage with the world. Thinking about the world in terms of things like bodies and chaos, rather than thinking about it in terms that are deterministic, or thinking about relationships in terms that are influenced by a superstructure or some other kind of systems that we're a part of. So I'm really interested in how that plays out. I think once you're aware that there's systems playing out on people, you can be a lot more forgiving of people. But when you're going to blame them for everything, it's tough. So I try to use philosophy as a way to move through the world in a more delicate manner.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that. And in honor of you, I think I just said yeah, no, yeah. So you're rubbing
Yeah,
off on
no.
me.
Yeah.
But that's the thing for me is I haven't always had an interest in philosophy or psychology, and I actually remember back in high school there were a couple of people in my class who got really into it, and I was like, what are you guys doing? You guys are silly. Like, the future is engineering, man. Like, technology, practical applicable things,
Mm,
right? and
yeah.
and it's funny because then now I went and got my electrical engineer degree. And then as time went on, I was like, oh, okay, I see the importance of philosophy and psychology and history and sociology. And I got a lot of interest in that, especially as I was traveling in the RV. I would say that's kind of where my biggest transition happened because, one, listening to a ton of podcasts and audiobooks and things like that as we're traveling around, but also we're going to a bunch of museums and seeing all of these different cities and learning the histories about how they came to be in different regions and also went up to Canada as well, and learning more about how both the U.S. and Canada were made in different parts of things. And it's just really interesting to know the story behind why things happened. If I had to boil down myself into a sentence, right, it's like I like to know how and why things happen, right? And by going into the engineering world, that gave me the technical chops to be able to dissect most technical things and figure out how they work and why they are the way they are. And then also from working in the quote unquote real world and the big boy job helped me see a little bit about how corporations worked, and some of my schooling in that, and business minor, extra certificate type of classes I've taken. I've mentioned in the past Lean Six Sigma stuff as well, project management things. All that stuff really helped me understand a lot more about why people do things the way they do, and how they react to things. And so psychology, philosophy, I think are very related, and I think it's good because in this day and age, it's so easy to not think about like why or what I'm doing. It's just like you're on the railroad track, especially in America. That's what I'm most familiar with. So I always say that, right? But because I know it's different elsewhere. You go to high school, and then it's like, all right, you're going to go to high school, then you're going to go to college, and then you're going to do whatever you're going to be when you grow up, right? And it's this track, and you just do those things, and people are telling you that's the path, that's what you need to do. And then by the time you get through college, you do the thing, and then a lot of times after a few years, you're like, wait, why? When, wait, what? So,
Or a lot of people take a hard look at it, and they look around at some of their other friends, the people that end up with master's or doctorate degrees who are $250,000 in debt and they can't get a job, and they just go, "Hang on a second. I think the system my parents, you brought this up earlier, like your parents are trying to tell you what worked in their world. Here's the kind of person you need to be. Here's the path you need to be on."
and the
And
house you
yet
should
you might
buy.
look yeah, just whatever it is, it's they're trying to live like an antiquated American dream that just might not work anymore. And so that's really kind of depressing. I've got friends that have degrees that can't seem to keep a job or land one, and they're having a lot of difficulty, and they're barely sort of subsisting, and it's very difficult on them, and they're unsure of exactly where things went wrong because they were following the path, and the path did not lead to thriving and success. And so there's this huge question mark that shows up where I did all the right things, and yet this life is not working out for me. At some point, I must have been lied to.
Yeah, and the topic of higher education, and especially I don't know the official word, but secondary degrees. I don't know, masters
Mm.
and doctorates. That's a topic we'll definitely talk about in the future, because I think it's an interesting one and a pertinent one, and one that hopefully could help some people make that decisions for themselves. Because another thing I've heard is when someone with a doctorate's trying to get a job, and they're like, you're overqualified for this. And it's like, what? So, and it's like, oh, well, we're not going to be able to pay you, the amount that, you could pull or whatever. And so, yeah, there's some things that get complicated with it. But it's an interesting thing, nonetheless. So let's take a 180-degree turn here and just go something completely different. Ryder, when I say the word bees, what does that make you think about?
Birds.
Birds and Bees, episode 69, folks. If you've not seen that one yet, make sure to go check it out. Let's try a different animal, skunk.
Oh, Pepe Le Pew.
Did you watch cartoons growing up or ever?
On occasion, yeah, yeah. We got Saturday mornings was the time that we had to watch cartoons, which was crazy because I would wake up as early as possible to watch cartoons. Like during the weekdays, say I woke up at 7. On Saturdays, I wake up at 6 just to get in as much cartoon viewing as possible before mom and dad would come down and shut off the TV.
That's good. And that's a something that existed and persisted for a while, because even though there's, I don't know, 10, 15 years between us, a lot of my friends did the same type of thing. And that wasn't a thing for me, largely because video games became much more of a thing, I think, during my youth. Especially, that was when it started to get connected by internet, and we used to actually had some friends text me earlier this week who were like, hey, I got this old picture of us, and it was us when we were like 10 or something like that. And I was like, oh, that brings back memories of back in the day when we were on the Xbox and we played this thing called split screen, where you had one screen, which was nowhere near as good as it is today, and then you split it into 2 or 4 pieces, and you were playing on that little portion of the screen, and nobody really complained about how small that was. Now today, if you split it even in half, people are like, "Ah, oh, grumple, grumple. This half is only 1080p on my 4K TV. Like, how am I supposed to be good at this game when I can't see all of that well?"
Oh, yeah, it is so funny when we get into our entertainments and how fussy we can get about it,
Yes, yes, it is.
and how quickly we forget these things. But yeah, the other thing about skunks is, oh, we caught one in a cage one time. I don't under. I think we had it was for squirrels. I think we were trying to
Intentional? Oh,
capture.
you were trying to catch squirrels. Okay.
We're trying to catch. So my grandpa had lots of pecan trees, and every year we'd shake out the
Pecans.
pecans, and oh, and there became this whole thing every year around this, and then the squirrels eating them, and then all of a sudden, like at one point, I was paid money to actually shoot squirrels with my BB gun because they were eating all Grandpa's pecans, and it turned into this whole
You'll shoot
thing,
your
and then
eye out.
my neighbors caught me like pumping with a little squirrel full of BBs, and they freaked out on me, and then I felt horrible about it, and I was like, oh man. So anyway, lessons learned as a young child with a BB gun. uh but yeah, I think one time we caught a skunk by accident, and it just like the smell is horrendous,
When it
and
got caught, did
just
it just freak out and spray everywhere, basically?
yeah. Yeah, and so then you basically have this thing sitting there, and you don't wanna get close to it. It stinks, and you're afraid you're gonna get sprayed again, and
That's when it's like a shoot 'em up movie. Like you want to know, all right, is the magazine empty? He's got to have some time to reload, right? Can we
I
get in?
know, what is the refractory period of your, stink glands?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. um, well, I wanted to tell this story about me. With when I was a kid, we played with airsoft guns. With for those who aren't familiar with airsoft guns, they are spring powered or air powered um, toy guns that fire little plastic pellets. And I remember there was one time, so at my parents' house, we have tons and tons of rabbits. And we have like a backyard that's kind of some backyard that's fenced in and some that's not. And there's like a creek and trees and stuff like that. But within the fenced in part, the uh, that's where we had to actually put up chicken wire and all these things that keep the rabbits from coming in and eating all the plants. And these suckers were crafty. And sometimes it ended up like, all right, you've got the one layer of, there's another name for it, but it's like kind of more like firm iron, not iron, but some sort of material where it's like straight poles, kind of like a grid, a square grid. And then you had to put chicken wire as well. And then maybe there was even some plastic stuff in there. I had to get multiple layers because they just keep chewing through. So yeah, there's one time where we had these airsoft guns and we saw a rabbit and pumped them full of plastic, and these don't go in the skin or anything. They just kind of hit off. But I think I was using one of the stronger powered guns at one time, and after I shot him once or twice, he started kind of jumping a little sideways, and I was like, oh, and that's when I felt kind of bad. And I was like, oh, sorry. And then I walked away.
I know. Yeah, it takes a different. It is also the distance. We were talking earlier about people complaining about their split screen size and the the resolution on it, and yet, like if you're out on a farm, then if you want food, you have to fight off nature, right? And then the minute we have to fight off nature, we feel bad about it. And there's this kind of interesting exchange that happens there, like all these kind of conveniences and the way we can feel bad about something or complain about something, but there's these kind of hardships, and there's ways of doing this that aren't cruel, that don't involve killing and everything else. But yeah, there is a distance from that we've sort of attained over time, to where our complaints are so sort of, I don't know, disengaged from sort of the practicalities of the world. And I'm kind of, when I think too back to, like, I don't know, shooting squirrels or rabbits or birds or whatever, like, why would I shoot a bird with a BB gun? It's just, at that point, it's just target practice, and it's practice for killing. It's not helping or fixing anything. And yet that was just sort of the culture that I grew up in. And so there's this, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say the magnifying glass to ants comes to mind as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like testing things out, the small cruelties that we sort of practice, and a lot of people have those in them, and it's sort of being aware of them. But yeah, I don't know. That was the interesting thing about having a BB gun is it's like by having one, I was going to do this.
Yeah. Well, it's worth noting that, as we got into airsoft, we started off with these kind of cheaper, I think they were like 20 bucks a piece, and they're little pistols, and you cocked them back, and they were single shot. You just cocked it back to load the spring, and then you pulled the trigger to shoot it. So you had to do that every single time. Well, then we got some that kind of shot automatically, so it went pew, 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 pew. And then I had some friends who got some better ones that were stronger, and like some that were hundreds of dollars. And there was one time where, after our friends got all these better guns, I was like, Dad, like they're getting me out in the battlefield. I need to need to beef up my arsenal. And like, okay, son, all right, you can get this thing. And so I got a gun that looked like it looked like a 22, which is
Mm.
a rifle for those who aren't familiar with that. And then my brother got like an M16, which is like a 22 is more like someone would have on the farm and
It's
maybe use hunting.
Yeah,
Uh,
22 is a small caliber bullet. So yeah, it's kind of a gun you could use to shoot squirrels or something. It's
yeah,
it's not a monster gun.
yeah, and then the M16, that's like I don't know if it's standard issue or not, but that's like the American military like assault rifle that they would use. And so we had these, and my parents approved. They even saw on the website or whatnot. But when they got in and they saw what they look like, and they saw them with us, they're like, "You guys can't use those." I'm like, what? We just got these things. We didn't get a chance. You said we could get them. And
Oh,
actually, there was a time, airsoft was growing in popularity whenever I was a youngin. And we got the cops called on us sometimes because people had various opinions, right? And I'm like, all right, people, do you really think that we're running around with assault rifles? Because people are like, oh, they're not clearly marked, they're not, yeah, there's the orange tip, but you can't really see it from far away, and some people would paint the tips and things like that, and it's like, come on, people, you really think we're running around with assault rifles? First off, where do we get these
no.
things? And second off, it's a bunch of 10-year-olds. What do you you know what I mean?
I know.
This is Texas too,
Oh.
dang it.
When I was in high school, then I had this old irrigation truck that was my truck, and I
Nice.
put the gun rack in the back, and I put my BB gun on it, and I just thought it was kind of funny to be carrying around this little dinky BB gun. Well, I one day I come out at lunch and the cops are surrounding my truck and they're like, "Is this yours?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "You can't have a gun on campus." I was like, "It's clearly a Red Ryder BB gun. My name is Ryder. It's like got a compass in the stock. Like, this is a toy." And they're like, "You can't have this here." And they like freaked out on me. And I was like, "Okay, I guess I can't have this here." And that was in the early 90s or the mid 90s. So this was not kind of one of those time periods where it was before all the school shootings and everything else. So this wasn't really a thing back then. Now I can kind of understand where that paranoia comes from. But back then it was just like, are you just hassling me to hassle somebody? But I know
Right.
somebody called them, right? They're
Yeah.
just like, somebody's got a gun on a school campus. And it was
But you're
just
telling
like,
me
and I
this
was like,
Bowie knife in my pocket's okay.
yeah, right, right. Yeah. Anyway, I also think that it was part of just being a kid at that time is like pushing boundaries a little
Yeah.
bit and just like trying to have fun and just goofing around, and then inevitably you get into trouble for goofing around, and that's what adults are for, is to just
So,
keep you from
Ryder,
having fun.
I gotta know, after you did that, did you say sorry?
uh, probably. I was probably just like really nice about the whole thing. I was just like, "Oh, sorry, guys."
Sorry. Is that where that voice comes from? Is that how you sounded in high school?
Yeah,
Hey
I
guys!
grew up most of my
Oh,
life like
it's
this.
just a Red Ryder BB gun, I
I
swear.
know.
Don't take me
So
to jail.
it wasn't until I reached 30 and I finally developed this voice, and then all
Yes.
of a sudden I got a girlfriend.
Hey, wow. It's funny how that works. Well, Ryder, I think another good topic, since you basically brought it up, is tell us the time when you were a kid when you got in trouble. It could be high school, could be younger. Give us a little bit of story from your youth. I mean, I'm sure you were just a perfect child and never did anything wrong, but
Oh no, never. Um, Man, uh, I'm remembering. getting spankings for things that were like, I remember one time doing something, I don't know. What did I do? I think I broke one of my grandma's stilts. She had these stilts that she'd put on and she could walk around the backyard with them.
Just
And
for fun?
it was, yeah, just I guess for kicks, just practice balance and everything else. And they were about 2 feet off the ground or something, and she just hopped, and they're just a pole. They're both just poles with little blocks on them, and you put your feet on the blocks, and you just hop out and you
You
run
just kind of
around.
like strap the thing around your foot or whatever.
She wouldn't even strap it on her foot. Like, she didn't like there was no technology involved in this. It was basically a pole with a wooden block attached to it, and she
Huh.
could make it work. And so it
Impressive.
was it actually, yeah, it took some skill and some strength, and she was kind of amazing at that. And so I remember one time, I don't know what I was doing, but I ended up like putting it on the edge of a concrete thing and jumping on it and breaking it, of course, because I don't know why I was doing this, because I was a
I
boy, I
wonder if it'll
guess.
break.
Yeah, I know, it was so dumb. And so I remember her just like whipping me, and then I just remember being so upset about it, like
Did
that
she
my
make you
grandma
go pick
whipped
out
me.
your own switch?
No, no, she had a paddles ready to hand. She
Good.
raised some pretty ornery kids. So she was good to go. She had an arsenal of paddles. Yeah, but I remember that one just being like, yeah, that was really dumb. That was just real, like it was just like pushing and pushing until something broke and then getting whipped, and then me being like, I can't believe it happened. I can't believe she whipped me.
Well, it reminds me of my father-in-law. I'm gonna out one of his stories. He was just a bad little kid in high school, especially. And so what he would do was he would go to his mom and say, "Hey, I'm gonna go do something bad. Give me my licks." Kind of like I've heard with Catholics, like I don't. It's not as much of a thing anymore, but you basically like, I'm gonna go do something bad. Let me come give my tithe. Let me give my
Yeah,
confession. Here's a little bit of money. Now I'm gonna go do that bad thing. He's like, all right, I'm gonna take
yeah.
my lumps first and then go do the bad thing. I'm like, I respect it. I respect
Yeah,
it.
yeah. There is something interesting about the punishment is supposed to be the thing that keeps you from doing the bad things. Like, it's supposed to be a deterrent, and it's funny when you think of it in the opposite. It's just like a payment. It's like a tax. It's like,
Yeah.
and then you just do the math, and you're like, "Am I willing to take
Is it
this?
worth
Yeah,
it?
I'll take
Yeah.
the
Is the
hit."
benefit
Yeah,
worth the cost? For sure. Like, this is gonna hurt for, I don't know, a little bit, and maybe if it's really good, a day or two. But now I'm gonna go get to do that cool thing that I wanted to do. It's interesting though. Beating your kids is something that is very frowned upon these days. I would be curious to know like how many people are still getting beat. Actually, I saw a video on Reddit the other day where it was like a Muslim family, I believe, and there was like a mom was beating this dude's brother, and he was in his room, and I don't know if he always has a camera running or if he just knew this was happening, so he ran and turned it on. But then he sees his brother getting beat. I'm guessing they did something together, and so what he does is he goes and he pulls out his prayer mat and he lays it on the ground, and he starts and he faces west or whatever, and then or east, I forget which direction, and he just starts, going and doing his thing, and the mom comes in and she's all ready to, and then she sees him, she's like, because it's a thing, within probably most religions, but within Islam, where you can't like interrupt someone when they're in a prayer. And so it's like, clever boy, clever boy.
yeah, very clever. Yeah, I remember some of that kind of stuff too, just like trying to make amends after the fact. It is like, once again, we need a childhood development expert on to talk to us about how we figure out the norms and the boundaries and all those kind of things. It is also funny when we talk about spanking now as beating. We just changed the language.
Right.
Oh, I was beaten, and it's like, you were spanked. There is a tremendous difference, and a lot of it is also just the context of it is like, yes, you are going to get 5 licks because you did X, Y, and Z. Do you know why you did X, Y, and Z? And then the kid says yes or no. And did you know this is going to happen? And they're usually like, yeah. And you go through this kind of cycle with them, which I think is a lot of a huge difference between disciplining your kid and just flat out like, slapping them. And so there's these, yeah, there's these kind of differences that have shown up. And I sort of, I was spanked. I wasn't necessarily beaten, and so I just, on occasion, I feel like I need to throw out that caveat. It's sort of like, Yeah, this was a disciplinary action that just involved the body. And now, apparently, if you want to get into some body autonomy stuff, you should read some early Foucault when he starts talking about madness and civilization. And he talks about asylums and the clinic. And at some point, then the body became something that we were no longer allowed to touch, where all punishments previously were based around the body and pain. And so this has been an interesting shift in civilization. So just a random thought for you out there, if you're
Yeah, how do
interested
you
in that
spell
kind of stuff.
Foucault? It sounds French.
Foucault.
Oh, okay. The ALULT. Oh, that's an interesting
Claw.
one. Yeah. All right, we're gonna have to take a screenshot of that picture and do lots of bad things with that. I like that. One thing that I wanted to mention, and then we'll wrap up, was if you are someone, well, one, first off, I do think that spanking is an art, and that is an art that I think is dying with my generation because they didn't know all of the ways. Like, I'm sure, like, especially with my parents, they know, like, okay, if you use the hand like this, it does one type of thing. If you have the ring, if you turn the ring around, you have like, you go into the closet, you have the different types of paddle. This one has holes in it, this one doesn't.
Oh yeah, and there was this whole psychology at one point about not using your hands. You need to have a specific tool, and it needs to be the same place, same tool. You don't use your hands because your hands are tools for loving. The tool that for spanking is,
Separated,
there's a
nice.
whole psychology that comes into it.
What's the term for the response? Like, you make a sound and then you give the mouse the cheese, and then every
Oh,
time he hears that
is
sound, he
that
expects the
Pavlovian training?
yeah, the Pavlovian training. So that kind of happens with the belt snap. The dad takes off the belt and he goes, and then it's like sometimes you don't even have to do the beating because that's enough to scare them or get them ready for it or whatnot. The last thing I wanted to say was if you're still getting spanked today, here's a little tip for you. The thing about it's not exactly bullying, but it's similar in some ways. The thing about bullying is if you make it not fun for the person or you make it weird for them, then they're not going to want to do it for you anymore. So next time you get hit, just turn around and be like, "Yeah, daddy," harder, and just see how much they beat for you. And depending on who your dad is or whoever it is that's spanking you, maybe they'll hit you harder for that, or maybe
Yeah.
that'll be the last day. You never know. It'll
Well,
certainly
either
throw them
way,
for a loop.
yeah, you'll have a story in the future.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. So, a quick recap: we started off. We we talked about. I had someone message me just now and say Pavlovian effect for them was tequila, and it used to make their mouth water, and now not so much. And tequila is one thing that probably has a lot of Pavlovian effects for a lot of people. So many people get way too drunk on it, and then they swear off it for the rest of their life. Oh, so today we had a no agenda type of day. We talked a little bit about Zettlecaston, which is a method of note taking, and Ryder was talking about some of the podcasts he was listening to and some of the books he's listening to. So, Ryder, I'll let you give a quick recap on those.
Yeah, podcasts, Acid Horizon, The Knowledge Project. Those are both some podcasts I enjoy. As far as the book I'm reading right now, it's The World Beyond Your Head by Matthew Crawford. I'm going to end up doing some podcasting on it on my own podcast, which is letusthinkaboutit.com. So within about 2 weeks, you'll start seeing those trickle out. This book is so dense, I'm probably going to end up doing like 7 or 8 mini podcasts just based off of the concepts that are in it.
Nice. So thank you for sharing that. So we talked about that, and then we also, as we were talking about that, we plugged our show next Thursday. We'll have some a guest coming on where we're going to be talking a little bit more about digital note taking, and Zettlecaston may come up. We'll talk about building a second brain, which is a method by Tiago Forte. Tiagoforte. In case y'all are wondering who that is, you can look him up. And then we talked a little bit about Ryder's childhood, how he had a gun rack and how he put his BB gun on that gun rack and got called. The cops called on him when he drove to school with it. And it wasn't just any truck, by the way. It was an irrigation truck. Did you ever load that up with like beer or something and just spray beer out on everybody?
No, I bolted the seat in it was so ruined from, because when you're doing irrigation, you drive, 100 yards and you get out and then you get back in, you get out. So the seat was totally trashed from all the movement on it. So I bolted that one into the back, and then I got a new seat from a junkyard and put it in the front. So I had multiple seats in there, and I would just bolt things into the bed. So I would eventually just have all my friends sitting in the back, and we'd all go to lunch, and there'd be like 20 of us somehow piled into this truck.
Nice.
Yeah, it was great.
I like it. And one thing I meant to do the other day but forgot was to put us into the 69 positions. And now, for those who are of audio only, I've rotated Ryder and I. So another plug for our episode 69. Go listen to that because it is a fun one as well. So that is it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Ryder, any challenge that popped into your head as we were going, or should I take a swing at it?
Take a swing.
Yeah, so I'll take a swing, and I'll keep it pretty simple for today. We talked about books, we talked about podcasts, we had some stories. I want to challenge you guys to go listen to a podcast or read a book or buy an audiobook, and go pick a topic of something that you're interested in, or maybe it's something that you've kind of had an interest in, but you've never really dug into deeper. Maybe that's psychology, philosophy, sociology, history. Maybe it's one of these things that we've mentioned, or maybe it's none of those things at all. It has nothing, doesn't have to do anything with us at all. Just think something that might have kind of interest you. That was a big shift for me, especially in my mid-20s when I started to realize, like, hey, I like learning a lot more and reading and podcasts and all that kind of stuff so much more when I'm doing the things that I want to do. And that was the thing about high school and college. Like, you have a little bit of choice, but not that much. So as an adult, and really as anyone, like, you can always choose to learn something on your own. And when you're learning about something that you're truly interested in, it actually becomes a lot of fun. I know learning's so much fun. Ding. But it sounds cheesy, but there's definitely some truth to it. And also, last thing I wanted to make sure to mention was every time we say the word bee, Ryder thinks about birds, which makes him think about sex. So that is it. That's what we'll leave you guys with today. Happy Thursday, and we'll see you guys mañana en la mañana. Adios.